All right, welcome back to the Music with Map podcast. I'm Wes.
And I'm John.
And today we are going to have a great conversation with a good pal of ours, somebody who works in the industry, lots of experience from an audio engineering background.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And without further ado, why don't we just kick it on over to you, my friend?
Hey, that's not really how I talk.
So yeah, introduce yourself, and then maybe just like in a nutshell, if you want to just sort of tell the folks what it is that you kind of do in the day to day with your work.
Sure. My name's Gavin Whelehan. I'm a Toronto-based composer and sound designer and audio engineer, and I work on a bunch of random things. But more recently, I've been focused on like post-production for TV and film again after straying away from it for a few years, and actually just started a new company called Megafauna Sound. Nice. Which is basically just an audio post-production facility for narrative projects like TV and film. And yeah, I don't know what else do you want to know?
No, that's great. We just needed the plug for your business. I think that's it.
Cool, I'm out.
Yeah, awesome.
Wrap it.
Appreciate you coming to hang and chat with us, man, for sure.
My pleasure.
And look forward to, again, like learning a bit more about the ins and outs of what you do. Obviously, you just touched on that. But before we get into that, actually, Wes and I, usually when we're running groups or anything like that, doing our music programming, we always like to kick it off with an easy one for you, okay?
Oh, there's going to be some hardball questions later?
Well, maybe. Yeah. Yes.
All right, give me your easiest.
I know we talked about audio engineering. This is actually going to be straight politics. And,
nice.
If you want to even give us your insight on like how you feel about vaccines, for example,
Great.
That would be great too.
Sure. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Like
no problem.
nothing screams audio engineering like opinions on politics and vaccines. So that's why we
and
write
it would be my pleasure.
Great.
I think the world needs more opinions. About
That's right.
things. Yeah.
And actually, if you haven't done this already, I'd recommend getting like a social media page started so that you can really let other people know what your opinions are. Because I can almost guarantee that people will refer to them as though they're just hard science.
And like, if I do that, people aren't going to argue with me. It'll just be like civil conversation mostly.
For sure. Yeah. That's a
out.
great thing about that platform. It's not divisive at all. It's not, you'll have none of that. It'll just be so well received.
I'm ready.
Yeah, and just absolutely revered by the scientific community as well. So,
nice.
Yeah. So look into that,
I'll check it out. Yeah.
It sounds like a great place you guys are talking about.
Yeah, it
I
sounds
know.
like an open discussion sort of heaven,
That's right. Yeah. And so basically we're going to try to emulate that with this podcast as well. Yeah.
I'm ready.
No, but Wes already knows the question. So, let's just check in first on what do you listen to? You've been listening to anything cool lately? Like, and maybe we should specify perhaps more on like the personal level and maybe like outside of work, or you could say if it's something work related, I guess.
So I did a throwback on the way here because I was thinking about you because I've known John for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, Queens of the Stone Age. And I listened to, I think one of the greatest rock albums of all time, which is Songs for the Deaf on the way here. Mm. And but lately, I haven't listened to that in a long time. Lately, I have been listening to there's an artist called 070 Shake that I like a lot that just released a new record that is produced by Mike Dean of Kanye West fame and a bunch of other things, which is very cool. I think it's called Wet or something. And I've been listening to... I listen to a lot of One O Tricks Point Never. Do you know who that is? He's like a
no
guy. His real name is Daniel Lopatin or Lopatin. I don't know if he pronounces it the French way because he's American, but he did like the soundtrack for a bunch of Safdie Brothers movies, like Good Time and Uncut Gems. And,
nice.
And but prior to that, and also post that, he makes his own music, and it's just such beautiful. It's like futuristic, sort of it's just really futuristic music, but very melodic and really like emotional, beautiful music. So
cool.
Let's go check it out.
That is very cool. Yeah. And interesting, always interesting to hear, like, especially, and I know Wes, you can relate to this too. You know, Wes definitely comes from like the audio engineering background as well. And I think that, you know, one thing that we've talked about and one thing I've definitely heard you say is sort of just like a general appreciation for sound and then how that plays into the music that you listen to as well.
Big time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
it can like, sometimes people say it's like, oh, it must be so hard to listen to music without picking it apart. And it can like ruin things for me if, you know, if I'm like, man, that's a good song if only it was mixed well. And other people are like, oh, dude, shut up. Or like I've had entire live shows ruined because I'm like, who the fuck is mixing this? Or like generally I hate Toronto venues for their sound.
right.
But it's also like, it's a thing that makes me appreciate music more and just the world more because I'm thinking about how sound is working and interacting, and it's like a really cool thing that your brain can like attune to if you want to. And I think anybody can think that way and suddenly notice new things in music or TV or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
It's an interesting it's an interesting concept in that you say that. Like I definitely get the live sound thing because, you know, there is a lot of there's no right way to do music. There's no right way to mix an album. There's no right way to do sound, but there's some wrong ways to do it.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And especially with live sound, there's a lot of different interesting barriers that people don't always overcome in the most effective manner. But even let's sort of flip the page back a bit, Gavin. How and why did you get into sound engineering or music production in the first place? Like it's you know, people think about, like you just mentioned, you know, producers working with Kanye West and things like that. Like when people think about people who produce music, that's where they go to first. But there's a long linear path to get there, right? Like
Totally.
How did you get started? What like kind of clicked and what attracted you to this work in the first place?
It's funny because like I grew up in a home that was just like music nonstop. From as far as recorded music being played, I don't mean my parents weren't really musicians, although my mom is an amazing pianist. But it was more just that my parents listened to such a broad range of music, like every style, and I mean like really weird, you know, ethnic folk music from around the world, classical music, jazz, rock and roll, blues, you know, everything. So I think that sort of set me up to enjoy sound, you know, in whatever way it came at me. And then I got into like playing music in school, or even, you know, I my parents taught me to, or sort of encouraged me to learn violin and piano and things, but I didn't like doing it, and I wasn't very good as a result. But then they always said, like, what do you want to play? And I said, trumpet. And they were like, here's a violin. And then that didn't work out. And they were like, well, what do you want to play now? And I was like, the trumpet. And they were like, here's a piano. You know, because mostly my mom wanted me to like play those classical instruments that she loves. And
so you're like, you must not be hearing me very well. I need to set up like a microphone or something like that, like, so you can actually.
One year they gave me a gift for Christmas that was wrapped in paper and it's the shape of a trumpet. So I was like, oh my God, it's happening.
Come on.
Dude, I opened it up. It was a fucking kazoo shaped like a trumpet. Sorry, I swore. But I was like so mad, you know, because I was like, take me seriously. And then fast forward to grade 6, I think it was. We had band class for the first time, and band or strings. And there was a day where you could sort of choose an instrument. And I was like, you know, I grabbed a trumpet, and it was like I was immediately good at it. Like,
really?
I could play it day one. Also because I used to do a lot of sound effects with my mouth and stuff.
Okay, right.
So buzzing my lips was like something I did all the time to make this like race car noise. So I was like already really good at buzzing my lips, which you have to do to play trumpet.
Right.
But it was mostly because I wanted it so bad and I loved it, you know?
Yeah.
And I knew, you know, like my hero as a little kid was like Dizzy Gillespie, you know? I was like, I knew the sound of a trumpet so well and I loved what it could do. So yeah, I excelled. But fast forwarding again, I kind of, as I got into my teens, I let my, you know, discipline practicing slide and got into girls and partying and things like that. Yeah. Like just rock and roll stuff.
Yeah, guy.
But I always loved making music. And there was this point where I was also like a big computer nerd growing up. Like we had computers in our house from when I was really young, like before anybody I knew had a home computer. Our first computer was like the screen was black and yellow. Those were the two colors.
Right.
And then, so I was like always fucking around with computers. Sorry, I keep swearing.
That's fine.
That's okay.
Messing around with computers. And I got to this point in my teens where I was like, I love computers and I love music. How can I make these two things go together?
Interesting.
But nobody around me was, knew anything about music production or whatever. So I then embarked on this like incredibly long, what should have been a much shorter journey on how to make music with computers, because even the internet was not very good back then to search stuff. And so
so therefore also, sorry to interrupt, but like also then there's such a proliferation of technology and devices available now to record music from home.
Oh my God. When I think about like kids that I know now, or like my friends' kids, and how they can just be like, how do you do this? And they just ask the Oracle and then it's granted to them. It blows my mind.
Right.
Like when I was a kid, or when I was that age trying to figure this stuff out, it was like pulling, teeth, trying to get something going. And I started by like, I remember there was this like Microsoft Windows, I think it was just called Recorder or Record or something. Mm-hmm. And you could record sounds. And there was a couple functions, like you could add an echo or reverse it. Mm-hmm. And like one of the things I used to love doing, actually, which I highly recommend to anybody out there to do, is to record a word, flip it, listen to it backwards, and then try and emulate it backwards, and then flip it and see how well you did.
Wow.
Oh man,
that's fantastic.
It's a really good game. And kind of an ear training tool too. So
that's actually, I hadn't thought about that, but like that is quite a minute sort of precision for how you would craft the sound.
Oh yeah, because it's like, orange backwards isn't what you think it is. It's like,
right.
It's like, it sounds crazy.
We'll have to splice that little clip and play it back and see how well you did
it's probably
there.
a swear word. So yeah, it was just for years like trying to cobble together knowledge. And I remember asking somebody that I knew who's like a DJ. Oh, it was this guy. Was it him? I might be mixing up memories, but I think it was the legendary Toronto DJ Sirius, who I knew produced music. This must have been like 1997 or 98 or something. And I said like, hey man, how do I make beats? Because I want to make like hip hop beats, And he was like, you need to get an MPC and you need to get, and I like looked these things up and they're like thousands of dollars. And I was also like, that's a computer, but my computer is a computer. So this computer is more powerful than that computer. So therefore this should be able to do whatever that does.
Right.
Which in theory is right, but the software didn't exist.
Right.
So yeah, to answer your question in the most roundabout way, it was just like a matter of, it was like an engineering problem. Like I had a problem that I wanted to solve, and then I just embarked on how to do that. And then over the years, I learned more about it through, typical channels. Like I did end up going to audio engineering school,
right,
where I recorded John's band's first record.
That's right.
Or no, my first recording of a band was John's band.
Right.
In like 2003 or something.
But it was pretty early for us too. Like that might have been maybe the second record we had ever recorded.
Yeah,
so
which went diamond in 5 countries.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm actually so surprised that I had enough time free to do this podcast recording, because like my schedule is so swamped from
touring.
From that one record.
Just those 5 countries though, which are
That's right.
Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea.
Yeah. Yes,
not big countries, but the diamund sales is what
that's
matters.
right.
Yeah.
Luxembourg.
Funny! I didn't know that.
Yeah. Myanmar and Kuwait. So I don't know why it is that these places
That touring, that is the most expensive tour those flying to those places.
Well, that's why my schedule's so busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah,
thanks
I'm just
for,
on planes
thanks
all the
for
time.
being here
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
That's
We
awesome.
almost zoomed in from the plane actually, but I'm happy to be here in person. This
Oh,
is
it's
really
sick,
great.
man.
Yeah,
It's cool to see you like being down to earth, and by that I mean on the earth.
physically on the earth,
Yeah.
not in the sky. Yeah,
Because you're not like, like your ego's still enormous, but
yeah.
your feet are on the ground, which is cool to see.
Thank you.
Physically.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And inadvertently that just boosted my ego. So thank you for
You're
that as
welcome.
well. Yeah,
No
yeah,
problem.
yeah. Also, shout out to those 5 countries if you're listening. What's up?
Big up.
Yeah, yeah. So happy that you're still listening to that EP from whenever that was, like 2000. I don't know.
2003, I think.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But there's this like, it's interesting because you think of the creative process and you just picture, especially when it comes to music, somebody like writing a song, writing words, playing it, and then they like come to somebody like you and say, okay, record this, and then they leave, and then you spend hours, and from what comes in to what you actually give them at the end of the day, it's just like this whole tedious, frustrating, time-consuming process, like. And inevitably, at least when I first started doing sound, like that was all you do is you just spend hours and hours working on projects for people that don't really know what you're doing or care what you're doing. They just want
it to sound good.
Why doesn't it, like, they just want this to sound like something that's on the radio, right?
And it's like you spend like an entire weekend, morning to night, working on something, send something to the artist, and they go, "Oh, is that's it?"
Or
Can
better
you
yet,
turn
they
this
don't
up?
say
Or like-
anything. They're just like, can you get this to me by Friday? And you're like, sure. And then you do. And then they're like, you don't hear anything back. And you're like, hey, did you listen to that? And they're like, oh, sorry, man, I haven't listened to it yet. I haven't had time.
You're like, cool, because I didn't sleep all week to make that happen for you. But whatever,
no
no,
problem.
that's
Take
fine.
your
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
But there's this beautiful like creative process. I mean, earlier you mentioned that like audio and sound is like an engineering problem for you, right? But there's also this like fantastic creative element to it where you do get like creative control over somebody else's original material, right?
Yeah.
And you get to shape it, right? Obviously they have influence, and that's where when you get more and more into the industry and work with bigger bands, there's a producer and there's just more voices involved and kind of guiding at least the sound engineer, who at the end of the day, for the most part, is just kind of pushing buttons. But
Yeah, it's an amazing thing that happens especially when you're producing music. Like I have to say, the fact that I do audio engineering now is kind of an accident. I was really like a music writer for most of my career, and cut my teeth doing like commercial music. So I worked for a company called Grayson Matthews for about 8 years, writing TV commercial and TV show and film music. And I was always very insecure about my ability to engineer mix music, because it's really hard.
it's hard.
And it's also even harder when it's your own music, because you just have no subjectivity or objectivity.
Yeah.
And so basically I just reached this point at not long ago where I was suddenly like, oh, I guess I'm pretty good at mixing, I was probably okay before that too, but it was like this moment where I just suddenly was like, it was easier for me. I understood certain things that, like, I don't know, just everything sort of gelled very suddenly.
Right.
And the funny thing is that the more I do it and the longer I do it, the more I realize that spending hours and hours doing stuff is the wrong way to go. And what you want to do is capture it the best you can at the beginning. And like
Before the stuff even gets recorded?
no, I mean like capturing the recording.
Right. Okay.
As it's getting played in the moment.
Like the best engineers in the world, and like the old school way that it was done was like what you hear is the record. Like, you know what I mean? Like typically when a Motown record was recorded, which I always use as like a benchmark for like amazing fucking music. Like it's just so many things came together to make that music good. It was like the almost accidental design of the sound studio in Hitsville, the players who are just like freaks, the songwriting freakish, and then the gear and final recording process that they used. But what was amazing was how simple the recording process was. It was like a lot of the time, very few microphones, just perfectly placed.
Mm-hmm.
The mixing was actually done a lot of the time, not necessarily in Motown, because they started to use more tracks and stuff at that point, but like a lot of like older recording was mixed by how far away you were from the microphone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like singer here, everybody else over there, and drums are the loudest, so they're the furthest away.
Right.
And then they started doing things like putting a mic over the drums and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But the point is that like mixing a record was the same almost process as recording a record, because you would get things sounding good in the room, and then you're like, all right, hit it, and people would play, and there might be some sort of color added in the final stages with an echo chamber, or some kind of tape, pushing it hot onto the tape and getting more saturation or something. But like
Right.
generally what you heard in the room, in the control room, was what it was going to sound like. And the longer I've been doing this, the more I realize that when you return to that way of thinking, the easier your job becomes, the better the performances are from the people making it, because they're hearing a pleasing thing in their ears and while they're doing it, and there's not a lot of stopping and going, and so the more I do it, the more I want to work with great musicians who are fast and capable at what they do, but then also the more I just want to nail it in the moment, which is easier said than done. There's like a lot of techniques that you have to learn and use, or trial and error to get to. But it's like the goal for me now is to do what I've kind of heard people say for my whole career, but didn't really understand, I guess, on a like visceral level, which is that you want to just capture the moment and capture things as faithfully as you can. Because if a band comes in and they're like, this is what we sound, they're used to sounding a certain way, and then you twist it all up and make it some new crazy thing, they're going to be like, what the fuck is this? Like, maybe you get lucky and they're open to some new direction, but unless they're asking you for it, you're messing up what they're doing well, what they've come to love about themselves, or what their fans love, or whatever.
Right.
So but nonetheless, all of that stuff, even if it is just throwing up a microphone and keeping it clean and simple, is still a magical aspect to the creation process, and I don't think enough attention or respect is paid to it, and it really bothers me how little people give a crap about sound.
All right, we're just gonna pause the conversation there for the time being.
It was super cool to hear Gavin talk about that idea of just capture the moment. Like I just love that idea of, the role of an audio engineer is to like very much be present, but at the same time kind of just step back and kind of just capture what it is that band or artist is just trying to accomplish,
And that's just it. So for everybody listening, thank you so much, and stay tuned for next time when we continue the conversation with Gavin.
Part 2 coming up with Gavin, so stay tuned for that. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening.